Melissa Conley-Tyler is an honorary fellow at the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne and joins us now live from Armidale in New South Wales in Australia. Ms Tyler, good to have you with us on the programme. Good to have you with us. Is it as easy as that, a handshake, and it's all sort of forgive and forget and business as usual?
Look, there's been a lot of work to get to this point, and I would see this as the culmination of a process of stabilisation over the last couple of years. Now, interestingly, of course, Australia hasn't changed any of the policy settings that led to the deep freeze, the inability to speak to any Chinese officials. What's changed is the tone. So the new government, when it came in, said, we want to stabilise relations. Yes, of course, we have differences, and we will continue to discuss those, but we want to work together when we can. So I was very pleased to see something like the joint statement that was signed today on how Australia and China cooperate on tackling climate change. That's something that the world cares about, that both countries care about, and obviously Chinese technology has to be part of the solution.
Well, taking in mind what you've just said, my next question was going to be who gains more from this relationship being, as we quote, back on track as it's being described. And the way you talk, it sounds like if Australia's position hasn't changed, China has a lot to gain by being back on track.
I think so. And I think it's interesting that the focus has so very much been on the trade side. I see a lot of commonalities in what the leaders are talking about. So in Australia, with cost of living crisis, the Prime Minister is trying very hard to talk about how the government is working for Australian jobs. You know, he mentioned today a quarter of Australians are employed in export industries. And of course, China is Australia's biggest trading partner. But it's exactly the same calculus from the Chinese perspective. So Premier Li himself has very much a background of promoting the economy. He comes from one of the entrepreneurial regions in China. When he was head in Shanghai, he was part of bringing Western investment in. So there's a lot of signalling back home to people who are worried about China's economy slowing, that this is their government working very hard to promote China's economic growth as well. So I saw a really interesting balance or symmetry between them.
OK, that's interesting because, you know, economy to one side, there's also security, isn't there? And that's a hugely important topic for both countries, especially in the region that they're in, because, for example, Australia's in what, a security pact with India and Japan, and China is, you might say, cozying up to a lot of Asia-Pacific smaller countries, but strategically important in terms of their geography and where they are. And this all impacts, really, in the messaging that is sent by those two countries to the US.
Oh, look, very much. And China says over and over again that it doesn't want countries like Australia to enter into, you know, Cold War pacts and blocs. And one of the problems, of course, with that period of economic coercion is it really was pushing Australia much more in that direction. Now, I don't think Australia is going to change on the security front. I think China would probably prefer that these discussions were all about trade and nothing else, but Australia very clearly pushes security issues. The Prime Minister, after the leaders' dialogue, went through the list of things that he promoted. For me, one of the best concrete outcomes from this meeting today is that there's going to be a new bilateral maritime affairs dialogue. And I think that's a great way to respond to a recent incident in the Yellow Sea, where Australian military personnel were enforcing UN sanctions on North Korea, and there was an incident with Chinese military personnel. Now, that is not acceptable, and Australia has to stand up very firmly on that. And it seems to me that it probably has, if this is one of the results from the discussions.
It does seem like it's work in progress, but heading in the right direction. For the moment, Melissa Conley-Tyler, thanks so much for joining us from New South Wales.
Thank you, sir.